This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 089.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Dr. Michael Bugg and special guest co-host, Dr. Jordan Woodsworth. You've been on so many episodes. We figured, hey, bring her on. She's co-hosting.
Why not? It's my turn now. It's like a bonus that happens when you get to a certain number of episodes, you get to co-host one.
Yeah, I think I might have even already said this one. We're treating you like the frog in boiling water. We just lured you in with one episode and then we're just turn it up. Now you're a fixture.
Now I'm trapped. Yeah, exactly.
So how was it for you, Jordan? I know you're very comfortable connecting with others and speaking in front of people. Another phenomenal guest. How did it feel in the co-host chair?
It was good. I mean, so I really like talking. And so it was interesting to, especially because I felt like I had so many questions to ask. It was interesting to have to temper that a little bit and like chill myself out a little bit because I couldn't ask all the questions I wanted to ask. I could have had, 2 more hours with this guest. It was so fun.
Yeah. And I know, and we'll get into it, but Kwane with Project Street Vet, when Jonathan was like, dude, I can't make the recording. And I was like, Jordan is perfect for this. Like, this is up your alley. So I was like, that's who we got to reach out to. And I could tell you're like chomping at the bit, but you had some great questions and things I hadn't thought of, to lead the conversation.
Well, and I think that's, one of the interesting things about having, at least some experience in this area is there's so many things, and particularly because doing this kind of work in the States is different from doing it in Canada. And so just hearing about some of the ins and outs there was a really interesting thing for me. So yeah, thanks for asking me to co-host. It was really fun.
No problem. Well, I'm going to take this little window of opportunity to let all of our listeners get to know you a bit better since you've been on so much. What is happening in Jordan's world here, kind of wrapping up April, heading into May 2022?
Yeah, well, this is always a busy time of year for me, always, between, trying to get summer organized for family and doing all of those things. But this is when I'm starting to gear up for clinics in the north as well. So I'm, getting supplies organized, getting volunteers organized, making my schedule. I've got emails coming in from all of our clients up in the north to try and get registered for the clinic happening the second weekend in May. And so it's always a bit of an insane time. But it's also one of my favorite times of year because of all of that. And so I really look forward to this time. And one of the things that's happening this year that's new for us is that I got approval to hire an admin assistant. So I'm working on that at the same time, trying to, I've got some applicants and I'm going to be setting up some interviews here right away to hire somebody to help me do the stuff that probably we shouldn't be paying a veterinarian to do for this program. So that's what's happening. And my brain was working overtime. I was having dreams about arriving in La Ronge without all my supplies last night. So
how many years has this been running now that you've been going up north?
Yeah, so this is, we started in 2014. So this is year 9, I guess. And we had a hiatus in 2020 because of the pandemic, but we did run a couple of clinics last year in a modified way. So we've been running pretty strong for the last 9 years, and it's my favorite part of my job. I love doing these clinics, and I love the relationships that are built because of them, and all of that. And I've been, lucky that my graduate work has kind of come out of that, and all of these things. So it's a pretty fun and rewarding piece of what I get to do. So
nice. And I was just saying for our listeners, because I know when we say up north, I have a sense of what that means. for lots of our listeners, Canada is already up north, but where exactly are you going in Canada?
Yeah, so we live in Saskatoon, so we're kind of like geographically not in the middle of Saskatchewan actually, but more in sort of the southern, third. And so when I'm saying up north, I'm going to a community called La Ronge, which is about 3.5 hours north. And it's sort of like the start of the north. It actually geographically is in the center of our province, and so it's a fair ways up there. The closest vet clinic to that community is 2.5 hours away, and so lots of people just can't get their pets to the vet. So it's great to be able to get in there twice a year and provide some services.
Nice. I love it, Jordan. You're always doing good work.
Fun stuff. It's the best.
Okay. Well, before we dive in here with our incredible guest and the bio, got to put you on the hot seat here for the quick tip. Jordan's first ever quick tip. And I'm saying ever because there's going to be tons more because we're going to keep inviting you back.
Oh, obviously, because frog in boiling water, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I was trying to think of this, and I find these difficult because I usually have thought of something before we have a conversation about this stuff. But I said to Mike, don't worry about it. I will just make it up. And of course, now I'm like, I don't know what to say. But I think my quick tip is, we were talking about social accountability in this episode, and so I'm going to try and relate it back to that a little bit. So especially for our Canadian listeners, one of the things that is really relevant in all of this conversation about social accountability and how we learn to take care of each other as veterinary professionals is knowing some things about our history in this country. And so this is where, left-wing Jordan comes into play. So the quick tip that I'm going to give to folks is I'm going to challenge you to go out and find out where you live, whose land you're on in this country. And so I talked about in a previous episode a lot about Indigenous, non-Indigenous relations in this country, and I spend a lot of time doing that in my work. And so there's an app that you can get called Whose Land. And Mike's going to laugh at me because he was talking about, there's an app on your phone earlier, but there's this app called Whose Land, and it's somewhere you can go to find out like where you are, what the treaties are that are in place on that spot where you are, and what's inherent in those treaties. And so that's my quick tip for folks is if you don't know, figure it out. It's a good place to start.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'm not laughing at your quick tip. I am laughing at, and this is for when Jonathan listens to this episode, and we were talking about the quick tip, and I was like, oh, you can just do like Jonathan and just look at your phone and pick one of the apps. I was like, that's the go-to move if you haven't thought of one in advance.
Well, and this is the interesting thing is it's great. There's lots of apps that can be interesting that people don't know about. So I love it. I thought it was a great idea. Thanks, Jonathan.
I didn't know about this one. So that is interesting. So, all righty. Okay, on with the show. Today's guest is Dr. Kwane Stewart. Kwane is a graduate from the renowned Colorado State University Veterinary program. Kwane has been in California practicing vet for 22 years. He has worked in nearly every part of the profession, honing his clinical and business expertise. His journey started in 1997 as an associate and an emergency clinician in San Diego. From there, he climbed the ranks quickly, becoming the chief medical officer of Vetco Hospitals, Inc. Later, he would take the reins of a struggling municipal shelter as county veterinarian and reverse one of the worst euthanasia rates in the country. Most recently, he completed a 6-year stint as the chief veterinary officer of American Humane and director of their legacy program, No Animals Were Harmed, protecting over 100,000 animals every year around the globe on film and TV sets. Today, he serves as the chief medical officer and head veterinarian for Papaya Pet Care. He has been sought for his expertise by many media outlets and major companies, including Disney, United Airlines, and SeaWorld, for guidance to improve their animal care standards. He is known for his outspoken, compassionate, charismatic, and genuine nature. Today, his career has evolved into another journey, his true calling, helping pets and people in need. And that's where we dive in on this conversation. Project Street Vet. Please enjoy this conversation with Dr. Kwane Stewart. You'll love it. All right, Kwane, very excited to have you on the podcast with us. We have a lot to get to, So I'm going to push us right into the deep end and jump forward in your career to Project Street Vet, because to be honest, that's where I found you on Instagram, started seeing the work you're doing and was like, wow, this is very cool. So let's jump in there. Can you tell us, in your own words about Project Street Vet?
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me. Project Street Vet, I love jumping into the deep end. Then we can just sink or swim. I'll share the fun stuff later. But Project Street Vet is a mission to help the pets of the unhoused. That is, in its most basic form, that is what we do. That's what I do. I walk our city streets looking for unhoused folks who own pets, and I deliver point of care. And I could be next to a traffic light and it'll turn into an exam room, or next to in an alley next to a dumpster, and that becomes my exam room. And I will administer care to the extent I can out of a little tiny bag that carries a small war chest of medications and vaccines and nail trimmers and flea medication, and that's it in a nutshell. I think the funnest part of the work I do is getting to know the people, of course, the pets. I'm a pet lover, but hearing the stories of some of these folks that live on the streets and how they got there, and their plans to, those are the rewarding, moving moments for me.
Mm-hmm. You can hear it in your voice. The word that jumped out to me was mission, right? Like it really feels like a mission as you describe it. It's not, a job, quote unquote. Can you dive in, like where did that originate from?
It didn't start out as a mission. Funny enough, it started out as a very secret hobby. In fact, for many years, I didn't even tell my own family what I was doing. This is where I do have to take us back for a moment. There was a time in my career when I felt like quitting the profession. I was burnt out. I was starting to feel depressed. And at the time, I was working at a municipal animal shelter in Northern California. It was during the recession. It was already one of the worst shelters in the country, sadly, when it came to euthanasia rates. And it was just this old, dilapidated shelter, smelled like rust and mildew and sewage, cramming 12 dogs into a very small area, a lot of them getting in fights. I'd have to patch up those dogs, and it was just like this endless cycle. And the euthanasia was getting I remember one day I woke up that morning and I thought, I don't really feel like going to work. And I almost had the I'm just going to stop here moment. My usual stop at 7-Eleven, and I kept noticing this homeless gentleman outside with his dog. And, true to my pattern, and regrettably, I ignored him, like a lot of us do when it comes to the homeless. Sometimes we're even afraid to make eye contact for fear they may approach us and ask for something. And that's where I was back then. This is 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But I broke routine because I saw he had a dog, and it looked like he had a dog that was suffering. It had a really bad skin condition. And as I got closer, I could tell it was simply fleas. And dogs can have such a bad flea condition that it just completely destroys the skin, and usually the hind end near the tail. And this dog looked like a burn victim. It was so bad. The hair was gone, the skin was raised and bumpy and infected. But I just stepped over. I said, "My name's Kwane Stewart. I'm a veterinarian, and I see, your dog is suffering from some sort of skin condition." He said, "Yeah, I don't know what it is." And this guy just had desperation in his eyes. He said, "No one can help, and she's miserable and scratching and itching all the time, and I'm miserable." And I said, "If you're here tomorrow, I will return and give something that should help." And I did. And it was just a simple flea treatment. It was $3 out of my pocket. And that was it. We chatted a little bit more, and I didn't see him for a while, but saw him maybe 10 days later, and the dog was transformed. The hair was coming back. The dog was wagging its tail. The infection was gone. And he just looked up at me, with tears in his eyes, and he said, "Thank you." And then I started to get tears in my eyes. That moment still chokes me up a little bit. That, I remember sitting in my car before going to work after the moment, and I thought, this is what I of. And then so began my little secret crusade. But the funny thing about it is I didn't want to tell anybody about it. I wanted this just to be mine, right? I gave my time, my service to work every day. And I just wanted this to be my little secret cause. And so I would go out on evenings and weekends and find folks on the street with pets and deliver care. And it was on my terms, and I was saving animals, and it was the best.
I can imagine. I can see you light up with it. I saw on some of your Instagram posts, you talk about that bond that, they have with their animals. And you said it's on another level. And it seems like you got to experience that and be a part of that. Like, how does that feel, transforming lives like that?
Yeah, it sometimes I have a hard time articulating it. As many times as I've spoken about this, to try and put the emotion that's exchanged into words is sometimes difficult. Yeah, but the thing is, I've seen thousands of clients in clinic before over the career. I really don't observe a connection between man and animal like I do on the streets. The bond, the connection that you see is just, it's like in the 99th percentile. It really is. These folks are with their pets all day, every day. I can't claim that. And they just know each other's movements. These dogs are so well socialized. A lot of them are off leash, just staying by their owner, walking around, visiting the neighbor, coming back. They have best recall. Very rarely do I meet an aggressive one. I mean, they're just remarkable dogs that are cared for by, in my opinion, very remarkable people who are just in some very tough circumstances. So when we get to know each other, during the course of, sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's 40. I've sat on a street corner talking with someone for 2 hours before. Usually when I leave, there's, we feel like we're saying goodbye to a friend. And here's the funny part. This will surprise a lot of people. I actually give out my cell number to everybody I meet on the streets because I'm their veterinarian now. I want them to be able to reach out should there be an issue in the future, maybe a reaction to the vaccine, if there's a recheck necessary, if they just have a question. I want them to have an outlet and a resource. So that becomes me going forward. And I've stayed in touch with a lot of these people over the years.
One of the things I'm really curious about is you talk about how well the people care for the dogs, but I wonder if you could talk about the ways in which these pets care for their people, because that's such an important piece of the dyad that we see between animals and especially folks who are unhoused or vulnerably housed.
Yeah, that's probably the best part. Here's a question that is on everybody's mind, and I'm sure you were going to ask me at some point, is do the unhoused even deserve a pet, right? It's a question I asked myself when I started doing the work. You see them on the streets, you say to yourself, you're struggling to care for yourself, right? You don't have this to take care of yourself properly. How can you take on the responsibility of a pet? What I've realized is this, that thinking is wrong. I was wrong because I would see an able-bodied man standing on a street corner, 30 years old, right, panhandling, and I would think, you can get a job, you should work, right? What are you doing just sitting begging all day? I've realized now that for me to project my story on them or my judgment on them isn't right, because there are so many different things that have landed these people where they are, and none of them really want to be there. Some of it's just bad luck and bad decisions, and we've all made those. Someone tell me who's not made a bad decision in their life. But for a lot of these folks, I've noticed they just didn't have the support, maybe family support. Some of them just children, and some of them have just been thrown into this economic war we've been in now for years, where their credit goes bad, then they lose their apartments, and they lose their job, they're sleeping in their car. They can't get an apartment once they've gotten a job because their credit's blown, and they're just stuck for a while, right? And they're just unstuck. So I believe for many reasons, they're deserving of a pet because they do give excellent care and attention to them. And the pet, to your question, the pet, the dog, the cat in some cases, I see cats maybe 5% of the time, the hope that they provide and the love, the companionship. I mean, you just ask this one simple question of everyone I meet, and it's, what would you do if you didn't have them? And the answer, like, I don't know. I don't know where I would be. But often I hear, save my life. They're the reason I get up in the morning. So the purpose that the pet gives them, and we all need purpose in life, right? And it gives them like still some sort of connection to society, to feel like they're still a part of something. They get up, they have something to care for, something that relies on them. It keeps them motivated. I was on Skid Row just a few days ago, and the sweet lady said, I've been on the streets here for about 6 months, but I got her shortly after I got on the streets, and she's my motivation for getting off the streets. My motivation in life now is to get her a yard. I'm going to get my stuff together. I'm going to get a job, and her and I are going to have a place in a yard one day. And she gets up with that thought every morning. And how cool is that?
Well, and I think it's, one of the things that you I think is a thread through all the things that you've been talking about is just the importance of relationship and how we all need that, right? We all need something to be connected to and someone to be connected to. And your point about often for folks who are systemically excluded or marginalized, having these pets, it can be life-saving for them. Why would we deprive people of that, right? Why would we say you're not deserving of that life-saving relationship? When that, that's sometimes we all just need something small, right? And it can be huge, but it can seem so small. And why would we not support people in that?
You're right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
She's on a roll.
About,
yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah. I just wanted to roll back to when you were talking about, your experience working in shelter medicine, and then that this fellow who was outside the 7-Eleven was kind of your toe dip into this world of providing care to unhoused and vulnerably housed folks. So, having this experience of burnout and often empathy fatigue in a situation in a shelter, especially when you're under-resourced and doing all of those things and having to be sort of up against this really difficult mountain of need without a lot to do, a lot of resources to care for it. How did this redirection that you took towards providing this care for folks on the streets, how did that help you recover from this experience of burnout? And what are the things that you think made that difference for you? Because some people might say, well, this is a path to burnout too, right? Because there's insurmountable need and not a lot of resources. So I'm curious if you could talk about that.
Yeah, that's the point. Because it's fair to think, well, if you're already, why are you going to go out in the streets and hear, in a lot of cases, let's be honest, depressing, very difficult stories, situations, seeing these people in these conditions, it is hard. But it's funny, I was watching this not funny, but Oprah does this thing called Super Soul Sunday. It was totally random. I was on a Sunday watching this, and she had this professor from Harvard on, and I was just, passing channels, and I got stuck for a second because this guy was just glowing, and he was so animated. He was talking about this course at Harvard they called it the happy class, but it was a psychology of contentment. And it was actually the most popular class at Harvard next to biology. And in it, this professor talked about how over time discovered really what they believe makes up happiness, right? Through scientific research and data and retrospective studies and so on and so forth, they've nailed it down to two things. Secret, here's the magic to life, is what he was basically trying to tell you, because we all just want to be happy in life. It is deep social connections, so staying connected to friends and family, and oftentimes what they found is when someone isolates themselves, then they become more depressed. They just start to further and further. But it's funny how when you're not feeling well, you don't want to socialize and be around people, but he says that is the dagger. So deep social connections, and it's for some people it's church, and it's their friends group, and it's their cycling buddies, but being around people has been shown to increase their level of happiness. And the second one is gratitude, and feeling grateful for what you have in life. seeing others that are grateful. He said that is the other major element in maintaining some level of happiness. And so, yes, when I'm on the streets, I can't help but to feel like I am still one of the luckiest people on the planet. What I've been given, so fortunate to have the support to get to vet school, get through vet school, parents that encouraged me, the resources to do it, the life I now have because of this profession. I am so lucky, and I feel that when I'm on the street. And that is sort of the dichotomy or the contrast. But the other part of it is you would be amazed at how grateful a lot of these people are despite their situation and how hopeful they are. I see happier people on the streets than, millionaires sometimes that come into my clinic with just a very upset attitude, and it's and they just, to me, seem miserable. And you'd see this guy on the street who has nothing. He's living out of a cart, and he's like, still alive, still have my health. And that, when I pull that from somebody, yeah, that gives me this lift, like you wouldn't imagine. I just carry on my day with a smile.
You can see that I've heard people talk about gratitude, and, writing it down is like, okay, that's a good step. But until it moves you, and you tell stories of connecting to these people and being moved to tears, like that is gratitude at a deep level.
It is. Yeah. And it sticks with you. It stays with me.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you said when you started this, it was kind of a secret and it was your thing. So I was going to ask you why keep it a secret, but that makes sense to me. It was something that was yours. When did you decide to share the secret and start telling everyone this is what you're up to?
I remember mentioning it to my brother after some years of doing it. I have one younger brother when we're close. He lives in New Mexico where I grew up. But I forget how we got on the subject, and it was sort of accidental. And he said, "It's cool, man. Like how he had questions. How long you been doing it, and why, and how do you fund it?" And so I remember sharing that with him. But really, the moment that made this, that gave me the 15 minutes, if you will, was I was speaking to a producer on a film set. And what a lot of people may not know is that I am an advisor to the film industry for keeping animals safe and protected on film sets. I work for Netflix. I'm their veterinarian still currently. And this goes back a few years. I was on set just sharing, kind of what I do, and he was really interested. And then I mentioned the street work I was doing, and he shook his head. He said, "Well, that's a show. Like that's a reality show. That's a docuseries." And he greenlit it. And we made this 12 episode, one season show called The Street Vet. And then basically everybody knew. It was in a secret. It went from being a secret to the whole world knows now suddenly. But it happened for a reason, I guess.
That is amazing.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay. I know this is a tangent, but it's jumping out at me is how do you deal with the dichotomy of being a street vet and working with unhoused that have very little like materially, to jumping on a Netflix film set next to Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio? You've said you've worked with them like that. They're just opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it is. I know it. The thing is, the setting I'm working in probably couldn't be more different. The people I'm meeting and talking to couldn't be more different in many ways, but the work is the same. I mean, I'm looking out for the health of an animal. It's really simple. You talk about Brad Pitt. Here's a very strong similarity between some of the people I meet about and the people I talk to on a film set is on this day. I remember a day where Brad Pitt was off talking about, I wasn't sure if it was his dog or a friend's dog, but he was gushing about a pet, right? I was just sort of earshot distance listening to this. That very same day after I finished on set, I did drive to Skid Row. At the time I was on the set of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and finished up there. And then I drove to Skid Row, and I was, 45 minutes later, I was talking to a guy in a street corner about his dog, and he was gushing on his dog. And if you just close your eyes for a moment and listen to the most famous people in the world talk about his dog, and someone whose name you will never sound like the exact same people. They really do. I mean, and that is the cool sort of common thread I think we share as pet owners, as pet lovers, is yeah, we're all the same. To them, there's our little world. And I don't know, I think that is one of the coolest things about what I do for a living.
So my question I'm just curious about is the funding model for this. So I know that now you are a registered charity with Project Street Vet, and that's all, you know, how it gets funded. But when you first started doing this, you know, a lot of people would have the question of how did you pay for it? So I'm curious if you could talk about that.
Yeah, it was all out of my pocket. Obviously, because nobody really knew about it. I just, you know, I took it upon myself to slide a portion of my income and devote it to this little secret cause of mine. And I did that for probably the better part of 8 years. And it was my brother who finally said, maybe 7.5, he said, hey, dummy, why don't you start a GoFundMe? So I was like, yeah, why don't I? I don't, because the problem was, you know, there were moments I just had to turn people away. There was procedures or surgeries I would meet. You know, I've done this work up and down the state. So I would meet a pet in San Francisco that really needed to have oral surgery, to have some teeth extracted. It was, you know, just suffering from a mouthful of cavities, essentially. And, you know, up in the Bay Area, $2,500 for something like that. And I just couldn't do it all. And I would do what I could, and I would call in favors and beg my colleagues, would you do this pro bono or reduce the rate? But it got harder and harder. And, you know, once we started the GoFundMe, that all changed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that it's a good thing to mention, because this begs the question, are we practicing veterinary medicine in a model that works and that is sustainable? Right? Because we're all accustomed to this fee-for-service model where I do a thing for you, you pay me the dollars, and out you go. But what that means is that the care that we offer is very often completely inaccessible to a large number of pets and their people. And so I wonder what your thoughts are on how this profession more generally needs to change the way we do things in order to better serve all demographics.
Yes, I think I'll give you an answer in one word. It's insurance. We need, I've thought this through many times over the course of years, and what needs to change to allow me to pay my support staff like a real living wage, right? We're talking about technicians, some of them who have the training, experience, professionalism, knowledge of an RN who's making 4 times what they make. How to pay my doctors better, how to pay my receptionists, so all of my support staff. And to your point, how do we get to a point where I don't have to turn away cases? The most devastating of those being like a hit by car I might see on an emergency shift. These people come and have no money. It's a pet I can potentially save, but when they tell me all I have is $300, I mean, that's enough basically to maybe stabilize them and give something for pain. There's nothing beyond that. And then to have to euthanize a pet like that, I mean, that's what starts to destroy us as veterinarians over time too. Yeah. I think if more pets were insured, and right now I think the rate is something like 2% or 3% in this country. If more pets were insured, like if we started to emulate the human profession a little bit more, then there'd be more coverage, and you basically spread around the dollar so that there are moments where someone comes in and you can say, no, I know you don't have the funds for this, but I can cover it, right? And when there are more pets being seen, and the higher level care can be provided. So it's not just, no, I just want vaccines today, but I can work up a case. I can do it right, even for those that don't make the most money. Then you're practicing better medicine. It's better for the pet, and that trickle down effect to pay my support staff. It all works together. So I can't really think of any other thing, and I've racked my brain, than to encourage more people to get pet insurance.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer. I mean, it's certainly one that would, as you say, spread the funds around in a way that might really actually fill the cup. I also sometimes wonder about the role of industry partners, because I think, oftentimes they've got pretty deep pockets too. And so maybe there's a way to integrate some of what they've got to offer that would improve accessibility too. So little challenge for any industry folks listening.
I know, you're right. Maybe it's a call to action for some of those, right? If you're right, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of companies, corporations with deep pockets. And one of the complaints I hear from my colleagues who work in corporate medicine is, at the top, they just keep getting fatter and fatter and stuff in their pockets. And meanwhile, I can't pay my student loans, right? So something needs to change. I hope someone's hearing this out there, because this has long been an issue since I started medicine 25 years ago, on coming out of school and being buried in student loan debt. And that's just another cloud that hangs over your head, in addition to the very tough work you're doing. And yeah, some of these fat cats at the top, they need to loosen up the purse strings a little bit and understand that to keep this entire profession afloat, and to keep it respectable, and encourage the next generation to want to do this work, right? Because vets are just dropping off the ship left and right. And I think Dr. Marty Becker was sharing a stat that only 33% of working veterinarians today would recommend this as a profession to somebody young. So for a lot of reasons, we're even down on our own profession right now. And what's that going to mean? What's that going to look like in a generation where we have no vets and record number, pets in this country? It's not going to be good.
Yeah. Kwane, I have a follow-up on the call to action around contribution, because so often people will, maybe it's just in their head, but I'll contribute when I've paid off all my student loans, or when I have X amount of extra money sitting in the bank. Any thoughts or sort of words of wisdom on getting people to start contributing in whatever way speaks to them sooner, instead of waiting for when?
Yeah, I guess to clarify, are you talking about anybody in the profession, veterinarians, how they may start finding ways to give back?
Honestly, this can just be humanity, like in whatever area, because everyone has their own ways that will speak to them and how they can positively impact others and contribute. And usually there's something holding us back, right? And lots of times we'll use the excuse of money and say, well, I'll do that once I'm earning more, or whatever it is. So I just wanted to get your thoughts, because you didn't wait, right? Like whenever that was, you said when this was still a secret, you weren't on the Netflix, payroll. You didn't have the TV shows, right? You didn't wait. You just were drawn to it outside that 7-Eleven and took action. So how do we get more people to do that?
That is $1 million question, my friend. If I have some thoughts, I don't know that I have the answer. Obviously for me, it was a moment that I was so moved, and it was just sort of serendipitous that at the time I needed something to change in my life. And that was my new course. But I think we are a very generous nation on the whole, and people are kind and give. But yeah, sometimes they're paralyzed or sidelined to do something for a number of reasons. I remember back, at a time when I could start, donating or giving. A lot of times you just don't know if this is a legitimate cause, right? You get these mailers or these emails, and you're just wondering, like, is this legitimate? You hear so often these days that funds are misappropriated, right? When there's a disaster or a movement, and you hear, well, the funds were spent for this or that, to buy a house, or the person, got some luxury vehicle, and you just start to become very discouraged. I remember thinking that a long time ago, and sadly, it's still a thought I carry is, are you going to do what you're supposed to do with this money? And so I think there's some distrust out there. And then, yes, for a lot of people, especially these days, it's economics. Like you tell yourself, I really don't have the money to help or to do anything. But you know what? It doesn't take a lot of money to make a difference. If you committed to giving, let's say, as an example, and to my point, when people are looking to give, I encourage them to give locally to their community, right? It's like buy local and support your local businesses. I think when it comes to, we're talking about pets for a second, I think, giving to your local Humane Society, which is different than the Humane Society of the United States, right? The big mothership. A lot of the money you donate to the national organization does not trickle down. A lot of people don't know this. to your local humane society, right? So just giving them $5 a month, committing to that, that can make a huge difference, especially when a lot of people start doing it, or giving to a local rescue that does good work in your community to rescue animals. These people that do it locally and don't do it, they're not sending out big ads and posting commercials that you see on TV. Those are people that really do it from the heart. That's what I've discovered, right? The local rescues, they're putting in, these are volunteers putting in sometimes 10, 12, 16 hours a day to save these animals, to find them homes, to do what I did, beg veterinarians to give them a reduced cost to do a procedure. I think it's wonderful. So yeah, do your research and feel comfortable where you're giving, but just know that just a few dollars to an organization can make a big difference.
Yeah. Like you said, that first dog, it was like $3 treatment. 10 days later, it changed the pet and the owner's life.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we're getting short on time. Anything to add, Jordan? Any final questions before we move into our impact round?
I think that my follow-up thought based on this conversation about contribution and giving is that I believe, and this is my very like left-wing kind of socialist view on life, but I believe that really what we need to get to is we need to get to a society in North America where we take care of each other. And that's an expectation, right? And that it's an across the board expectation. And there is a spectrum of contribution based on where you sit in the capitalist system. And so that's ultimately what I would like to see. And so back to talking about, how we put pressure on our industry partners and how we put pressure on, the people who have the means to, responsibly have money set aside for taking care of one another and making society a better place for everybody, I think is ultimately where we want to get to. And, also remembering that it's not only money that we can give to improve the lives of other people and to improve the lives of pets. It's our time and our expertise and our passion, and that's what you've done. And so I think that that's a really good model for folks to look at as well.
Yeah, well said. You're right. It's not always just money. Giving your time and your support, and sometimes just the positive messages I read on Instagram, those fuel me. And when we come together on one issue and we really want to solve it, we can. I believe that's the case with the homeless issue. We keep throwing band-aids at it, and one politician will come in with grand ideas, and those will stick for 2 or 3 years, and then someone else will come in and completely change it. And there's been no consistency to solving this issue. And it's no wonder that it hasn't been solved, but it's a civic issue. The funny thing is, this is a societal problem of our creation, which means it has a solution, right? If we really want it, people just, they see the homeless and think, well, as long as it's not a problem in my neighborhood, then we're okay. But as soon as it starts to encroach or creep into their communities, oh, we have to do something now. We have to do something. I mean, these are human beings on the streets. These are our fellow countrymen, and they're just in a bad spot. And I believe so many of them can get out of it if they just had more of a helping hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Kwan. I mean, I feel like we could probably go for several hours on with this. So we're gonna move into our impact round here as we wrap up. Again, thank you so much for joining us. So we have a series of short questions here, same way we wrap every episode. So first off, are you a cat or a dog person?
That's tight, man. I own 2 pets. I have a cat and a dog, and I'm going to offend one of them. The cat is she's running around here. If she hears me say the dog, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm probably split. I love and appreciate them both. That wasn't always the case. I was always a big dog guy for a long time, but I'm a cat guy too.
Okay. That was interesting to me how you said you see cats on the street, like I think you said it was roughly 5% or so, but that would be interesting. I know now I'm breaking script. And do you see like those street cats with their owners, like the same bond, like the cat sticks around with that owner?
Yeah, these cats are like dogs. It's crazy. They'll come on command. You think cats will just wander and stray off and never come back, but no, they know their zone, and they come into, the person's tent and use a litter box. And yeah, I'm telling you, better behaved cats than I ever see in the clinic.
Nice. All right. True or false? I knew I wanted to be a veterinarian since I was a kid.
True. 7 years old.
Nice. How would your friends describe what you do for a living?
I think my buddies, and I've known these guys since undergrad, so like for nearly 30 years, I don't think they know exactly what I do. When I start talking about Netflix and the movies and I'm on the streets and, you know, I got in my clinic, I think they get turned around. They just know I'm a vet.
What is your favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby. You know, I enjoy playing, and I did this last night. I enjoy playing Texas Hold'em. I like playing poker. I like the game, the strategy, the probabilities behind it, the math. Yeah.
Nice. What in this world are you most grateful for?
I am most grateful for my health. And I think that is probably the most precious thing we have in life, is first waking up and having our health. And I know there's a spectrum when it comes to health, but I'm very, very fortunate and grateful for that.
All right, Kwan, I know there's going to be people that want to reach out and, you know, follow you. Where would be a good place that they can do that? Social media, email, website?
Yeah, you can go to projectstreetvet.org. That is our website for the charitable organization, and you can see stories and get updates and donate if you'd like. And then if people want to follow me and catch little bits about me personally, and then me on the streets doing the work, they can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Kwane and the Street Vet. And between those three sites, you'll probably know my every movement more than my own mother does. So,
okay. Anything to add here, Jordan?
No, I just want to tell folks that I just started following Kwane on Instagram this last week, and there's gold there. It's a gold mine. There's lots of amazing things. And so if you need proof that these bonds between unhoused folks and their pets is as strong as we've been saying, that's where you need to go and see those beautiful stories.
Thank you.
All right, Kwan. Well, thanks again. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we wrap with the final word to you. What message would you like to leave for the veterinary community?
It's not just for my own colleagues, but for everybody in general. What I've noticed in doing the work on the streets, and just life in general, this bleeds into everything I do, going to the grocery store, spending time with my kids, is I feel like, sadly, we are lacking tolerance in the world. If there's one thing that's in short supply, it's tolerance. We seem to be very intolerant of each other's political views and religious beliefs and sexual orientation in our culture and background. And it seems more prevalent, this intolerance, than it was when I was a kid. And you would think that we'd keep moving the needle forward. And for whatever reason, we're at a time, this window of time these past few years, where that just doesn't seem to be the case. And when you're intolerant of someone, you're less likely to show kindness to somebody for something as simple as holding the door. I feel like a Democrat probably wouldn't hold the door if he knew the other person was a Republican, which is sad. And unfortunately is where we're at. But if we set aside our judgment of other people and don't get so hung up on ideology and what your view is and what my view is, you will find that kindness just comes out more naturally. And the work I do and the message I try and send is just trying to demonstrate that kindness, in my opinion, really does fuel the world. And don't be afraid to show it.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap, on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly. So be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the veterinaryprojectpodcast@gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Light, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.